Welcome to the Garden of the Black Roses with this story called The Garden of the Black Roses. This story actually was an idea when Tsubasa Chronicle and Holic were being made. So they were just coming out, and Holic in particular had connections, Tsubasa Chronicle as well, had connections to all the other different Clamp stories. And so this was kind of like a offshoot idea for me, for my website, or my brand. I don't know how to, what to call it. I'm guessing brand at this point. Had a story that connected to all my other bits and pieces of writing. So this story was born, called The Garden of the Black Roses. There's only one chapter, so I will read it to you now. Chapter 1. Within the garden, mysterious things happen. The most mysterious, and perhaps startling secret of the garden, is the three sisters who tend to the garden. They are the guides and gatekeepers who can both help and hinder visitors to the garden. Let's see who today's visitors will be. Sui! A woman in her 30s with deep, curly red hair called. A swish of her waist-length hair echoed along the corridor of her home. Casey! She peeked into each room, occasionally catching a glimpse of her green-eyed self in a mirror, her sun-staff shining light through the darkness to aid her search. Where are you two? The orb is glowing again. Ada, does it say where the visitor is coming from? Called a soft voice from down the hall. I'm trying to work on a few potions in here. A woman in her mid-20s leaned out of the door at the end of the hall. Her straight blue fringe fell over her right green eye. Despite living with her, Ada always was startled when Sui looked at her with her mismatched eyes. Sui blinked and brushed her hair away, causing it to fall over her left red eye. Well? It doesn't, Ada replied, coming closer to Sui. However, it's overly bright, so I'm guessing it's the desert? Sui ducked back into her workroom and turned everything off before coming out again and closing the door. I can't find Casey. She's probably on the jetty again, Sui replied, dragging her hand through her blue hair to undo her braid. It unwound quickly, revealing streaks of reds and blondes through it. You know how she likes to think things over. Together they walked through the back door and down the winding path to the jetty below. As predicted, they found Casey with her eyes closed, the wind playing with her long golden locks and pulling at her clothes. She seemed to be affecting the tides as she breathed in. The tides came rolling in, and then the tides rolled out again when she breathed out. Sui wondered if she was setting her breathing to them rather than her setting them to her breathing. Casey. Sui rested a hand on her shoulder. The orb is glowing. You need to come up to the house. Casey sighed and followed them back up the cliff. Before going in, she placed her jewelry on the stone table in the sun to charge. She followed her sisters down to a circular room that descended downwards like an amphitheatre, towards a small circular stage with the orb sitting on a pedestal in the centre. Limestone seats lined the descent in segments. As it was once as if at one time the orb had many viewers, more so than the three sisters currently. "It's intense," Casey murmured, placing her hand on the orb. Her sisters followed suit. "I see a desert, the desert of lost souls by my guess." "I can see him," Sui murmured in reply. "He seems to be from Rise. Correction, Orion. He has the pointed ears of an elf." "I thought Orion is deserted," Ada asked, focusing on the image of the elf in her mind. "Is that no longer the case?" "It still is deserted," Casey confirmed. "You were right the first time. All the elves are now on Rise." She looked at his dusty brown hair. "He seems armed." "Not seems," Ada replied, slightly alarmed. "He is! How is that possible? The gate shouldn't allow weapons through." "We shall have to go and investigate the gate there." Sui opened her eyes and picked up a staff. It may have been tainted by something. With a wave of her staff, she created a doorway directly to the gate. "I hope it's nothing sinister." Ada jumped through after her. "We'll search for our guest," Ada replied. They both looked back at Casey questioningly. "I'm going to retrieve my jewelry. I'll make my own doorway there," she said with a smile. "Catch up with you soon." The elf wandered curiously through the desert. His white jacket flapped wildly around him. "This can't be Orion," he murmured out loud to himself. "Where has Anima sent me?" "Fancy me being the first to find you." Casey stared at him in surprise. "I hate all this sand, so it's good that you haven't moved far from the gate. Who exactly are you?" The elf gave her a slight bow and a very charming smile. "I'm Stykesty Oranus." Before he could finish, Casey jumped in over him. "The Prince of Elves of Orion." Casey smiled broadly. "The gods have told us much about you." She lowered her voice and added, "More than probably you even know." Stykes frowned. "Where am I?" He stared at the sand. It's not a very hospitable place. He watched her fiddle with her bracelet. "What are you doing?" "You're in the Garden of the Black Roses," Casey replied. "It's an intermediary place of sorts. We're both part of time and outside of it." "We?" Stykes asked curiously. He could tell there was more going on than she was letting on. "And how can something be a part of time and outside of it?" "How were you able to get here?" Casey asked. "We, meaning my sisters and I, can be a part of any timeline in the known universe, yet we are not affected by it." "Anima," he paused. He paused in case Casey was going to interrupt him again. "Attempted to modify a mirror so that it could link to Orion as well as Hell, kind of like a three-way portal." "I see." Casey shook her wrist and tapped it once more. It buzzed like an old radio. "Sui, can you hear me?" "Hmm?" Sui's voice came through the bracelet, startling Stykes. "What's up?" "I found our visitor," she said with a smile. "It seems alchemy is what allowed him passage with his weapon on board. How's it going on your end?" "Not good." Sui's voice was definitely frustrated. "We'll need Ada to decommission this one and erect a new one. The alchemy used was severely flawed and damaged the gate." "We'll make our way over to you. Casey replied. Get in touch with Ada so she can do the same. Ada had already started to head back when Sui contacted her. She turned her back to the sun so she could look into her shadow. Sui's green eye looked almost red and bloodshot. Casey's found the visitor, she said briskly as she fiddled with a lock of blue hair. She said alchemy was used on the gate. You'll need to decommission this one. That will take me a few days to do that and erect a new one, Ada replied, walking forward, keeping her shadow in front of her. We'll need to take him to a different gate. Agreed, Sui said with a nod. When you get here, we'll decide which one to send him to. Styx stared up at the gate he came through. It began to shrink until it turned into a semi-large baobab tree. Where did it go? Ada decommissioned it, Sui said, throwing a forest green potion at the tree. The alchemy that Anima used was flawed to the point that it damaged the gate. Ada needs to erect a new one close by. How long will that take? He asked. His tight voice was the only indication of his worry. He stumbled slightly, pressing a hand to his head. Odd. Anima's memories will still reach you here, Casey confirmed quietly. She's probably worried, as she'd be seeing this strange place in yours. She watched him shake his head before straightening up again. So that begs the question, Sui asked as Ada started to draw the start of the summoning circle on the sand. Which gate should we take him to so we can send him back? Which is the closest? Ada asked, planting an orange-sized seed in the ground. You better get moving before nightfall. I'll be protected by my sun staff, but it won't protect all of us. The gate in Monolith's waist is probably the closest, Sui replied, waving her staff and then pointing it to the ground. A sparkling line flew out towards the distance. It looks like it's pointing towards Monolith's waist. The last time you did that, it guided us to cross a river, Casey said tersely, almost a kilometre away from the bridge. At least it gives us an idea of what direction to take, Sui replied in an annoyed voice. Styx had the distinct impression that Sui was related to Anima in some way. Her appearance and personality were both very familiar. And that's it for this chapter. It's probably the only chapter I've written, only because at the time of writing this, I was also writing The Adventures of the Iron Wolves, which is where Styx and Anima come from. Only I haven't finished that one. I finished the first book of it, and part of the second book. But I have plans for a very lengthy series for it. So it's I've got all these drafts and everything, but I haven't gotten to them. But yeah. So I'll see you in the next video of whatever it is I make. As always, remember, let your imagination grow wild. Bye for now.